Hello everyone, welcome to chapter 5 in analytics. In this chapter, we're talking about the profitability and financial value of customers. Okay, so we're concerned here with not only the value of customers, but the value of relationships. So we're going to look at, the cost and value of finding new customers, but also the cost and value of maintaining existing customer relationships, which at the end of the day is your best strategy. So not an easy thing to do, but we can do it. So it's easier to count transactions than it is to count specific customers, but if you have some way to link customers to transactions, it's helpful. So the loyalty programs that we all sign up for, we think that the companies are just being altruistic, but actually no, they are doing it. They're incentivizing you to join up so they can have more accessible or detailed data about your purchasing habits. Okay, so if there's a contract, a loyalty program, some sort of account, then it becomes a lot easier. Okay, so we have to talk about a few definitions here. One thing we have to talk about is the current customer. So companies have basic definitions of who is considered an existing customer or a current customer and who's no longer a customer. I worked for a company where we did a lot of customer retention analysis, and quite simply, if a customer hadn't purchased from us in the last 90 days, they were considered inactive. Those that had purchased in the last 90 days would be considered current. So we're going to talk about retention, we're going to talk about churn, and in both situations, you have to basically determine, again, who is an existing customer and who's not. Okay, depends on the nature of the business. The sales cycle in some businesses is very short, and some it's very long. So if you are a auto manufacturer or a washer and dryer manufacturer, purchasing in the last 90 days isn't going to work. But maybe the last 3 years or 5 years or 8 years. Okay. So another term that we talk about is what we call recency, which is basically the time since the last purchase. You want consumers to come back again and again and become loyal customers, but again, it depends on the nature of the business. Another concept we have to talk about is what we call retention. These are basically customers who have not left. Okay, so you've got to decide what left means. Okay. And so that's kind of how this works, is we're concerned with, in this chapter, first of all, about keeping customers around. Customers that stick around typically buy more, they buy more often, and they're much more valuable to the firm. I worked for another company where we actually did this analysis and could confirm that the average order size of our returning customers was 3 times that of our brand new customers, and so we really focused on trying to get customers to come back. Okay, so let's start with the formula for retention rate. Retention rate is just the number of customers retained divided by the number of customers at risk of leaving. Okay, so if you consider 90 days and sooner existing and 91 days and later former customers, you could consider maybe those that are between days 75 and 90 as being those at risk. So once you've specified who that is, then you can determine a retention rate. Okay, so you've got a company, Billy's Massages. They've decided they have 35 customers that are at risk. They also know that they retain 12 of those. Okay, that gives us a retention rate of, quite simply, 12 over 35, or 34% and change. That's your retention rate. Okay. Know that the flip side of retention rate is what we call churn rate or attrition rate. The book kind of refers to it as both. So churn or attrition rate are the opposite of retention. So know that churn rate plus retention rate equals 100%. Okay. All right, let's talk a minute about customer profitability. Know that some customers are going to be more valuable to you in terms of profit than others, okay? There's a couple of figures in the book that talk about kind of, segmenting your customers into groups based on how profitable they are, okay? And so this is basically an example of what it could look like, okay? So in the 0 to 10% band, you've got $100 million of profit. In the next band, you've got $50 million in profit, and on and on and on. You can see once you get into the 80% and above, you're actually losing money on those consumers, okay? So you can put people into buckets like this and determine what to do with them, okay? Those that are causing you to lose money, you can think about getting rid of them, but there also may be reasons to keep them as well, okay? So if you may be able to convert unprofitable customers into profitable customers. I mentioned earlier that repeat customers tend to pay more, and that continues to grow over time. So you could convert unprofitable customers into profitable ones, okay? Word of mouth. If you fire a bunch of unprofitable customers, they're going to be mad and they're going to probably tell other people. But on the other hand, if you're willing to keep them around, then they may say positive things about you, okay? So that is an issue. Also, from an accounting standpoint, you've got fixed costs you're trying to spread out. The more customers you have, the more you can spread those out. It's good for your bottom line to some degree, okay? And you can see here the 0 to 10% band. 60% of this company's profits come from that, 30% from the second band, and so on and so on. Okay. You can also look at it graphically. It's just that same chart, just in a different format, and you can see that again as you go from decile to decile, you get a group of less and less valuable customers. Okay. You can also look at it by cumulative profits as well. So instead of band 1 gives you 100 million, band 2 gives you 50 million, you can kind of add them up as you go. And so you can see as you get to the 80% and above, that number starts to go down. Okay. All right. Problem with kind of looking at that is it measures past performance. It doesn't necessarily take into account the future. Okay. So we have some formulas that help us address the future. The first one is called customer lifetime value. In principles, you probably calculated this with a bit of a different formula. But in this situation, we're going to use margins, contribution margin, retention rate we've already calculated, and something called discount rate, which is going to be given. Okay, and discount rate is just basically the future value of money today. Okay, and it's just something that you figure in. Okay, so internet service provider charges $19.95 a month. Okay, they know their variable cost per month per customer is $1.50. Okay, they know they spend $6 per year per customer on marketing. Attrition or churn is 0.5% per month. That's given. We're given a discount rate of 1%. The question is, what is the customer lifetime value? So plug all that information in, and you should get something that looks like this, or $1,191 is your average customer lifetime value. All right, remember that attrition rate is the flip side of retention rate. So if your attrition rate is 0.5%, then your retention rate is 99.5%, which is great. In reality, that's probably way too high, but it is possible. Just keep that in mind. Okay, then we have something called customer lifetime value with initial margin. So sometimes when you sign up for a service, for example, you sometimes have to pay something up front. Okay, it could be 1 month of service, or it could be some special sign-up fee, registration fee. It could be anything like that. Okay, so we can account for that. So go back to our internet service provider, $19.95 a month, variable cost of $1.50 a month per person, marketing spending of $6 per year, attrition of 0.5% per month, discount rate of 1%. All of those things we have already been given in the previous example. Now we also have a registration fee that's also $19.95. So the question is, given this initial margin, what does this do to our customer lifetime value? Okay, and it looks something like this. The number actually goes up. Okay, so basically your registration fee, you know what, something real quick I didn't mention here. When you calculate the margin in the way we've given it, the marketing spending is $6 per year, but our price and variable costs are by month. So in order to keep the numbers consistent, you've got to divide this marketing spending by 12, by the number of months in the year. Okay, so I didn't mention that, but just make sure you keep that in mind. Okay, so anyways, getting back to this, our registration fee is $19.95. The registration fee is also subject to the $1.50 variable costs. May not be necessarily the service, but could be the the expense of someone signing you up. Okay, so anyways, all you're doing is you're taking this margin and you're adding it in a second time. So anyways, that gets you customer lifetime value with initial margin of almost $1,209. Okay. Customer lifetime value assumes an infinite horizon. Okay, so you can kind of look at it going forward. Okay, discount rate is huge. Okay, this is a chart that shows the percentage of customer lifetime value that you accrue or achieve in the first 5 years, given retention rates and different discount rates. And as you can see, you get almost all of customer lifetime value. Customer lifetime value. You get almost all of it starting at if your retention rate is 40%. As it goes up, the value is in the first 5 years is less because you're going to retain them longer than those 5 years. Okay, prospect lifetime value. This is a little bit different, a little bit harder to wrap your head around, but with prospect lifetime value, basically, instead of looking at the average lifetime value of a customer, you're looking at the average lifetime value of a prospect. So you're not only concerned with those who do buy your products, you're going to throw into this the costs of those who do not become customers, that kind of stay prospects. Okay, so here's our formula. So we'll just do a quick example related to this. So let's assume that you are in a business and you've been given $60,000 to place an ad. Okay, you know that the number of viewers is 75,000 people. Okay, you know also that you have an acquisition rate of 1.2%. That means that 1.2% of viewers are actually going to make a purchase based on your advertisement. Okay, there is an introductory offer of $10, and there is also customer lifetime value of $100. Okay, so all this information is given. So the question is, what is your PLV, your prospect lifetime value? And this is all you do. You take the acquisition rate, you multiply it by the sum of the initial margin and the customer lifetime value, and from that you subtract out the cost per marketing spending, acquisition spending per prospects. You're taking the ad cost divided by the total number of viewers. Okay, and so that gives you, it's not showing up there, but it gives you a prospect lifetime value of 52 cents. Okay, so the average value of any prospect is 52 cents. So if the number is positive, Anything over 0 is good. That just means by placing this ad, you're going to be successful. Okay, so it doesn't sound like much when you kind of compare it to a customer lifetime value, maybe hundreds or thousands of dollars. But again, you're including the costs of trying to acquire all prospects. And remember, in this situation, you're only acquiring 1.2% of them. So the number is going to be low, but it is positive, and so that's actually good. Okay. Then we have something called expected prospect lifetime value. So here we're just looking at the total payoff. So all you do here is you multiply the number of viewers times that prospect lifetime value of 52 cents, and that gives you an expected PLV of $39,000. Okay. All right, break-even acquisition rate. This number is usually pretty small, so just keep that in mind. All we're doing here is determining what does our acquisition rate need to be to enable us to break even on the money that we spent trying to acquire new customers. So this is acquisition rate, a little different than retention rate. Acquisition rate is the cost of, I'm sorry, the how successful you are in acquiring new customers. Okay, so acquisition rate is per prospect. Initial margin, CLV, we've already talked about. Your ad costs, we've already been given, of $60,000. The number of viewers is 75,000. Initial margin of 10 was already given. Customer lifetime value of 100 was always given. Plug all that in. Here's your break-even acquisition rate. It's 0.7273%, so less than a percent. Is that good? Is that bad? It's probably not bad because it's very low. It's less than 1%. Your acquisition rate given was 1.2%, so it's much higher than this break-even number. So that's actually pretty good. All right, average acquisition cost. How much does it cost for us to acquire a new customer? In this situation, acquisition spending is total acquisition spending. It's not per customer. That's actually what we're trying to figure. Ad cost is $60,000. That's our acquisition spending. Our rate was 1.2%. Number of prospects was $75,000. Our average acquisition cost then becomes 66.67. So all you do is you take your acquisition rate, multiply it times the number of prospects. That number right there becomes the number of customers acquired. That becomes your denominator. So $66.67 is your average acquisition cost. Net CLV. This is like CLV, but it accounts for prospecting costs, the cost of trying to acquire new customers. So our CLV, we talked about before, is 110. It was the 10 initial plus the 100 CLV. We just calculated an average acquisition cost of 66.67. So our net CLV, very simple calculation, is 110 minus 66.67. So once you eliminate the acquisition costs, you're left with 43.33. So some companies don't calculate prospecting or acquisition costs as part of CLV because it makes the number much lower, but in essence, it probably makes sense to keep it. Average retention costs. So this is basically the same as, or calculated the same way as average acquisition costs, but it's for keeping customers instead of acquiring new customers. So, pest control business. Okay, they spend $1.4 million on prospecting. They spend $500,000 on retention. Okay, we know that we've retained almost 88,000 customers. Our average retention cost then becomes $5.68. It's simply this number divided by that number per that formula. Okay, so we could also, calculate the average acquisition cost as well and compare the two numbers. So I don't have a slide for it, but basically you could talk about, well, you know, in this situation, we spent 1.4 million on prospecting. We earned 64,800 new customers from our prospecting or acquisition efforts. So that 1.4 million divided by 64,800 would be $21.60 per customer. Compare that to your 568, you will see, well, it's much more expensive to acquire customers than it is to retain customers. So it gives you some information to let you decide that, well, we need to really focus on trying to retain customers because it is much more efficient. It's much cheaper for the firm. Okay. All right, and that's all for this lecture. This is going to be, you know, the homework for this particular chapter. Everything is contained in this particular lecture. There is some other things in the chapter you don't have to worry about. Just the calculations we've done here are the ones that are going to be relevant for the homework. So that's it. Thanks. If you have questions, let me know.